Horizon Forbidden West released exactly 1 week before Elden Ring, which in hindsight was probably a death sentence as it squashed out all the hype for what I now consider a goddamn forgotten classic. Forbidden West continues the story from Zero Dawn, and again you play as Aloy, dropped off into one of the most diverse open worlds gaming has to offer. You don't get a lot of old versus new world games. Typically it's a fantasy, or it's a realistic game, or it's something around a post-apocalyptic setting. Here it's a tribal game meets future tech meets desolate remnants of western United States, and the result is bright and inviting and just goddamn beautiful. Walking through a place you've been in real life is pretty cool, but flying towards one that has been reimagined for the sake of another fictional world is something else entirely. The amount of creative work and diversity they managed to squeeze inside this world is just so breathtaking, and it made exploring the various biomes very, very enticing. The gameplay process of West is similar if you've played any other open worlder, as it relies heavily on minimap icons and the follow me quest arrow. These tried and true elements can be very dull, and games like Elden Ring have shown how to break this mold, but that doesn't mean both styles of games can't have their own charms. More organic exploration likely would have only added to Forbidden West, and there's something to say about the autopilot nature of it, but the superb presentation to its story, the high production values of its side quests, and the creative gameplay options make the world a joy regardless, especially when you unlock the Sunwing mount for flight, and when you encounter the Tall Necks, which are amazing little puzzle sections that you complete to reveal parts of the map. Moving away from just climbing something to actually having to complete a challenge is always going to bring out more interactivity, as climbing is inherently pretty boring. And the cool thing is, these tall necks all have unique challenges, and I have to commend the team for some of the scenarios they put you in, such as solving the ocean tall neck, which was really cool to figure out. Giving players a flying mount at the end of the game is smart because it doesn't trivialize world travel and exploration while you're playing through the story. By the time you get to it, you'll likely have revealed large portions of the map, so its purpose is convenience. And the mechanics of it are just unreal. I mean, I've never flown anything in a game that feels this good. The PS5 feedback system on the controller provides incredible immersiveness to the game, whether it's feeling the pullback from bows or other tools you use, or just feeling that heavy sense of physicalness to flight. A lot of the times technology gets in the way. Horizon's feedback is present, you can always feel it, but eventually you forget about it and it just becomes part of the experience, and I think that is a really good thing. It almost looks and feels like you're playing Avatar the game as you soar through the jungles and the wilderness of this title. At all hours of the day, it is simply one of the great joys of this game, and one of the best iterations on player travel I have ever seen. In addition to the expanded climbing mechanics, no, it's not on the level of Zelda or anything like that, but it is far more unconditional than the first game. The Pullcaster and the Shield Wing, I have to ask myself if I could ever actually go back to Traversal in Zero Dawn. Now you might be saying, well, these changes aren't very groundbreaking, but they aren't exactly minor either. Creating a sequel requires a lot of things. Innovation, you've got to build on top of what you've already made. But you've also got to make sure not to alienate your fans, right? You certainly can reinvent the wheel if you want to. The Zelda games do, and that's what makes them more unique than iterative, but it's certainly a risk to completely overhaul a game when you don't have a huge IP attached to it, and which you know beyond any doubts will sell like hotcakes regardless. Forbidden West lands somewhere in the sweet space for my taste, right in the middle, giving you a lot of what you'd immediately expect if you played both games back to back, but then also interesting game systems that fundamentally change how the game is actually played. You don't find a lot of bow hunting games. In fact, this is one of the only franchises where third-person ranged bow combat is your primary gameplay. Most games use ranged combat as supplementary. It's almost expected at this point that a bow should be used as a backup weapon, and this dates back to the days of Nintendo. Modern third-person games in the open template typically feature melee as the primary. Horizon's bow combat feels amazing, and this was the #1 reason why I consider this game such a breath of fresh air. A lot of the times in open world games, combat is not the main selling point. Fallout, The Witcher 3, Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto, on a fundamental level, it's not uncommon to find a last-gen combat system in a current-gen open world game. You might find an interesting gameplay mechanic like Fallout's VAT system, but let's not pretend the gunplay was great. Tons of open world games have pretty crappy combat systems, as they hope to compensate with story, world design, etc. Horizon gives you pretty much everything an open world traditionally does, less major choices of course, but also has a AAA polished combat system that is mammothly deep and satisfying, and pretty different from the first game. In Zero Dawn, combat was pretty basic. It was almost a bow dodge shooter if you break it down. It was less about tactics and more about knowledge and reaction. Zero Dawn let you get away with aggroing large amounts of monsters with endless dodge, unlimited jump shot slow motion, and a few weapon combos that gave far too much crowd control. Forbidden West is actually instead a game where preparation is encouraged. It's best to scan, ambush, and strategize versus shoot, and dodge at the right time. This was achieved by removing the long dodge from the first game, and also restricting successive dodges. You can only roll 3 times in a row anymore, and your character will briefly stumble. These two things are obviously pretty big nerfs to roll dodging, as it essentially vaporizes your invincibility frames when you incur the penalty. The game wants you to instead control the battle and slodge, aka slide dodge. You execute this by hitting run, slide, dodge, and then run again. If you do it right, Aloy will go from running to sliding to dodging to continually running in the same animation. You input that last run command, by the way, otherwise you'll end up crouching after the slodge. And if you do it correctly, you can avoid most attacks in the game from machines and humans. You additionally get a faster draw speed for your arrow during the slide animation should you want to just use that time to attack. This is a lot more inputs than simply holding circle at the right moment, and thus arguably more mechanically taxing. This is somewhat of an issue though for impatient players who like to charge straight in like an idiot, especially considering Aloy's wake-up timer has been increased by a few seconds. In Forbidden West, it takes forever for Aloy to get up after she's been knocked down, and initially, I actually hated this, because you can get smacked around a lot, and there's a lot of wasted time simply getting back off your ass and into the fight. The truth is, it took me a long time to appreciate Forbidden West's combat system, but once I did, I realized there was some method to its madness. The game wants you to play smart, analyze the strategy, and ambush the machines. It doesn't want you to run in and just start shooting shit. In order to make you stop doing that, they had to take away the mobility tool that enabled that playstyle and punish you for becoming dependent on it. Does it make for a fun gameplay mechanic? No, of course not. Nobody wants to wait 3 seconds to stand up in a video game, but the message had to be delivered regardless. I don't think this was the best way to do it, but if you learn what the game wants you to learn, you'll find an incredibly different and very fun gameplay system here. Take this fight for example. This is a Slaughter Spine, which is one of the hardest enemies in the game and a pretty cool design if you ask me. If I was just to run in and start shooting it with my bow, I can guarantee you the fight would probably be a complete clown fest. I'd get slapped around like a moron and the machine would probably kill me as I'm playing on a hard mode here. I might be able to kill it if I was patient, but its huge health pool is going to take some time to chip through. So in Forbidden West, we actually have to use tactics, and this is where the game shines. The game gives you a lot of options to do this, and I can show you at least 5 ways of approaching this fight in which I can immobilize this machine and kill it without taking a single point of damage. I could use shock arrows to stun him and rip off his tail weapon, and then laser the shit out of him with it. I could use Purge Water to remove his frost resistance and then stun him with freeze arrows. I could cover him in acid. I could use adhesive damage to slow him. I could use rope casters, tie him down, and then chain stun him with elemental damage, all the while tearing off his weapons and dancing around him like a ballerina. Or we can take it one step further and look up his weak spots in the notebook. This is where West gets really tactical and deep. The Slaughter Spine has a very specific weakness. It's a plasma core located in his stomach area. It's protected by a shield, so our plan will be to stun the machine, rip the shield off, and then expose the plasma core for big damage. So we track his movements, place a few Purge Water traps down, and the explosion rips off the plasma core shield instantly. We then follow up with a flurry of shock arrows to stun him, before proccing our Valor Surge ult, and a braced shot to the plasma core for massive damage. Afterwards, we can freeze him and continually pelt his weak spots that we've already exposed. This results in a 54-second kill as opposed to an 8-minute sponge fest if we just rushed in without a plan. The point I'm trying to make is that this isn't Zero Dawn. This game isn't just about dodging at the right time, it's about disabling machines and killing them before you have to. Dinosaur keeps charging you and knocking you over? Tie it down with a rope caster so he can't move, pop your shield, and shoot the absolute shit out of him. Big glowy sack on a machine's back? Stun him and blow it up. Fat hippo no like poison has shiny blue hotspot on belly? Tired of annoying fast raptor dinos who hit you with their tail and smack you about? Just use knockdown arrows. I'll take that free crit, thank you very much. Think tripcasters are useless? Use them to zone small machines and get free kills. Use your invincibility frames to blow up enemies and not get damaged in the process. On a side note, you can actually use your ultimate abilities to avoid taking unavoidable damage. Activating your Valor Surge at the right time will give you a bunch of free iframes. There are so many options for you to completely immobilize and with these machines to the point where you're not even going to need to dodge as long as you use your noggin. In this encounter, I know this enemy is weak to frost, and I could start shooting him with frost arrows if I wanted to. Or I can use my brain, take the time to draw 3 arrows to guarantee a one-shot stun, load my bolt caster before I engage, and identify his weak point in the menu archive. And if I do, this happens. The game offers all of these great techniques that I assume people are not using because they're trying to play Forbidden West like they did Zero Dawn, and you can't do that here. The emphasis moves away just from dodging a lot to the interplay of your movement, tactics, and spacing against machine attacks, to which I have to point out are very well telegraphed. One of my favorites is to combine the smoke bomb and the cloak ability, which puts you completely out of combat. You can then reposition, craft traps, and set up another ambush mid-combat. It's very satisfying stuff. This is the reason why West's open world is more compelling than most. The combat is next gen, highly polished, and simply crazy fun and tactical, and each encounter plays out a lot different when you experiment with all the options Aloy has, including advanced gameplay tactics like stacking partial elements for maximum damage and crowd control. Truthfully, I didn't know any of this though until later on, and I think that's why I actually didn't like the combat for about 15 hours or so. The game felt very, very spongy, and I had to actually lower the difficulty to easy because it was so laborious and time consuming to fight enemies. But obviously this was because I wasn't using my head. To be fair, the game has a very steep difficulty curve. Combat is sometimes overbearing with the use of the weapon wheel, which can have up to 18 elemental variants given your 6 equipped weapons. Slowing down time helps, but still, cycling between so many options can be fumbly inside the chaotic, scrappy combat early on. And learning how the elements should be used and the weaknesses of the machine takes a lot of time. This isn't a game of immediate satisfaction. Forbidden West starts slow, the learning and the story too, but once things got moving and I learned the mechanics offered, I was able to gain a profound appreciation for it in a way that was completely different to Zero Dawn, and it turned out to be one of the most fun open world games I've played in a very long time. Speaking of difficulty, it's also very nice to see such an expanded suite of difficulty options in the game's menu. Breaking down difficulty options by type is a very smart idea that allows players to customize their experience without the devs having to dumb it down for others who want a more serious challenge. No game is perfect though, and there are plenty of things that I hope to see fixed for the 3rd installment. Melee combat needs to be reworked, again, as even with the improvements from Zero Dawn, it's nowhere near where it should be. The developers added a lot of melee options for combat, so it's clear they wanted to give you the option of fighting up close and personal. However, it's only viable when fighting humans, but even then, it's less than ideal. Aloy has the warrior bow, melee combos, armor breakers, charge attacks, jump off bow strikes, and the ability to trigger resonating strikes for massive damage. However, melee damage is relatively low, and fighting in close proximity nearly always results in getting knocked over constantly. It's also just not very fun, as a lot of our more useful skills require charging your staff with the R2 button, which leaves you immobile, or for you to chain multiple attacks together to trigger a resonating strike. By the time you charge it or finish that combo, it's a crapshoot whether you're still on your feet or not. Frankly, it's always more optimal just to use your bow. Knockdown arrows can trigger free instant kills, frost arrows stun humans almost instantly, and the volley skill with the hunter bow one-shots any human without a helmet on. And in addition, you could use shock arrows with volley to render groups of enemies pretty much helpless. If Horizon wants you to take its melee combat seriously, Aloy needs a parry or a shield. This seems like an easy add-in considering Aloy already has a shield wing for a flotation device. An upgrade in the melee skill tree could be added to install, like a coating around the shield wing in which you could block and parry, and one that could break if Aloy uses it too much. The limited use or shattering of the protective coating could make sure it's only used as a fallback mechanic, as we don't want to turn Horizon into just another melee action game. Furthermore, a timed parry would also give that very satisfying counter hit mechanic to combat that the game desperately needs. Without any of these mechanics, melee combat is a complete afterthought, used only in the early game and absolutely never against tough machines on basically any difficulty setting. In addition to melee, elemental damage was also not balanced correctly. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I'll just say that Frost is king, Fire sucks, and Plasma is very situational. You can pretty much use Frost as a general counter to everything, and even if they're resistant to it, you just use Purge Water to make them weak to it and then freeze the crap out of them. It's basically easy mode. The game has some other minor flaws that irk me a little bit, like Aloy constantly blurting out how to solve the game's various puzzles. I'm no Einstein, but I'm not an idiot either. I can solve these rather basic puzzles without being told what to do, so it was a little bit annoying to see this happening.
I should be able to glide over. Here I come!
However, I'm not really surprised to see this in Horizon, as the game is certainly more of a party pleaser than for a niche audience. The story too ends a bit weird for my taste. I won't spoil anything, but the game's primary villains are really cool and very unique. Yet they fail to capture that sense of fear because, like a lot of games, they don't have proper screen presence. We need them on the screen more to make them more of a threat. And the ending is quite rushed and throws another curveball into the plot at the last minute, which feels a little bit cheap, considering the story for the first 30 hours is actually really fantastic. After finishing Forbidden West, I have to say the game is breathtaking. There's a tremendous amount of very well-made content in this game, with an advanced AAA gameplay system slathered on top. It has the single best flying system in any game, well-voiced characters, great side quests. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the overrun cityscapes of San Francisco and the flooded ruins of Las Vegas. The game is stunning with a shocking variety to the landscapes, always though fun with heartwarming companion quests. I have to shout out the incredible quest with Moreland in Vegas, a character that just brings a smile to your face. And as a bonus, the tribulations of Moreland and his friends showcases the phenomenal swimming mechanics of Forbidden West, which is often an afterthought in many games. Swimming in Horizon is enchanting. It has a very calming element to it, thanks to how the audio was treated, and the subtle rumbling mechanics when Aloy swims. I found myself swimming a lot in this game, which isn't something I normally like to do, and the Vegas quest gives you plenty of time to enjoy the mechanic while also giving some really interesting combat scenarios inside this area. And afterwards, you can take a hot air balloon up to the sky as Moreland advances his quest for tinkering and building things. It ends up just being a really cool moment, and I'd recommend checking up on this guy later to see what he's up to. Horizon Forbidden West is a classic that shouldn't have been forgotten, but probably did. This small video was my attempt to give the game the love it deserved, and I highly encourage you to pick it up if you forgot about it. Chances are you'll find a beautiful, fun, and challenging game with just so much to offer.